Yes.
So what's macroevolution? Yes, Ashley.
That all life forms are just a common ancestor.
Right, it's what we think of when we think of the word evolution. And so all life forms emanated from a single cell amoeba, the first living thing that came about by chance from non-living things. So that first single cell amoeba occurred randomly by chance in a completely blind process of non-intelligent origin. So God nor any other force, unless it was aliens, God was not involved, or no supreme power, or nothing outside of the universe was involved. So that's macroevolution. So from one cell amoeba came everything that is living, including us. Number 2, why is Darwinists' usage of natural selection a misnomer? Misnomer just means it's properly named. It doesn't mean what it says. Yeah.
There's no actual selection going on. It's just a blind process.
Yeah, if it's a blind process, there can be no selection. A blind process is selection requires some sort of intelligent selector, right? You can't select even things like that are randomly selected. Somebody behind that randomized some process. So I can put a blindfold on and start pointing to pick people out, but I'm still an intelligent person making those points. Does that make sense? So there can be no selection in a blind, unintelligent process. Who selects? It would be like, picking teams for kickball. How do you do that accidentally? How do you accidentally pick teams for football or for kickball? So selection. And that's not an argument against natural selection. It's just to say that the name itself kind of connotes that there is some sort of design. So I thought of this last night. I don't know why. Probably just too many years ago. Say you're at a restaurant and you're ordering. Someone's going to select that. You can either pick something out and select it, or you can say, surprise me, but then the waiter or waitress is going to select. Somebody's going to select. So explain why microevolution cannot be used as evidence for macroevolution. So microevolution, we didn't answer that or talk about that. Microevolution is changes within a species, and it has been observed that there are changes within a species that take place. So a Darwinist would say that microevolution is proof of macroevolution. Why is that not true? Yeah.
Microevolution can prove natural selection. Selection because the life form, there's small changes within the life form, like it evolves and gets more suited to the environment, but there's no like a monkey dramatically changing into a human. There's no such changes between life forms.
Right. So no matter what happens with Darwin's finches, they remain finches. Microevolution is proof of microevolution. It's a separate thing. It doesn't give any evidence of microevolution, which has been observed, doesn't give any evidence for macroevolution that has never been observed. Microevolution is adaptations in a species or living matter that helps it survive. However, no living organism has ever been observed to evolve to another kind of living organism. So then it went through several scientific facts that make evolution, a macroevolution, at least unlikely, if not impossible. So how is, the first one was genetic limitation. How is that proof against natural selection? Let's start with what is genetic limitation.
That like species change within themselves. They don't like turn into new things. They just like vary from different versions of the same thing.
Right. So there seems to be this limit that you can go so far, even when you're doing this intelligently, like scientifically, like making changes to living things in a lab. You get to a point where there's a wall, and it can't change anymore. It can't morph into something that it's not. It can change within itself, but it can't become something completely other. So no matter how scientists try, they can't mutate one type of living thing into a different species. And almost all their efforts to do that actually make that living thing less capable. It ends up being, the mutant ends up being what we think of as mutant, right? It doesn't work properly. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. So how is cyclical change proof against natural selection? So first let's talk about cyclical change. What do they mean by cyclical change? Yeah, Autumn.
Changes that change back and forth with a limited cycle.
Right, like Darwin's finches, right? When seeds were harder to find, in drier weather, their beaks would grow longer. And then in wetter weather, when seeds were softer and easier to find and easier to break open, then their beaks would be a little bit smaller. But that's just a back and forth thing, right? With seasons or with conditions that have been observed to happen. So change within a species does not move forward toward a new species. It never has done that, but rather back and forth within a limited range. This is a quote from the book. Natural selection can explain the survival of a species, but not the arrival of a species. So how is irreducible complexity proof against natural selection? What is irreducible complexity? I mean, this is the most important fact of this chapter. What is irreducible complexity? Yeah.
It's like the bare minimum amount of parts you can have for the machine to still function and do what it's meant to do. If you're with a lot of parts, but it either doesn't function or
Right. So an irreducibly complex system is one in which if you take any part away from it, it will no longer function. In some cases, it won't function at all. And in other cases, it doesn't function well. I don't know, anybody remember that scene from Sound of Music? And they're trying to stop the Nazis from chasing me. Am with me at all here? Because y'all are looking at me like that's the Sound of Music. And the Nazis are chasing the Von Trapps, and And the two nuns, come up to the mother nun and they say, "Sister, we have sinned," and they take out these car parts, right? And they're out there going, and it's not starting. That's because a car engine is irreducibly complex. And anyone who's had car trouble before knows that, right? That each part is necessary for it to run correctly. So our systems are irreducibly complex systems. I don't mind this on the table, but so y'all in Spanish 3, you're going to Central City, and the first thing I thought of when I heard Central City was the couple of days I spent in the Central City Hospital, being told that my heart doesn't work correctly. My heart is irreducibly complex, and if one valve isn't working correctly, then it's not going to work correctly. And that was the case. And so still is the case. Our bodies are irreducibly complex. Now, are there parts of us like our appendix that we can live without? But much of our bodies are irreducibly complex. And if you take that out, if you take the heart out of a living thing, that's it, right? That they need that to survive. So, so while these animals are changing from one thing to another, for one example is it reptiles to birds or birds to reptiles? Okay, so during that millions, probably billions of years change, there would be a time when that animal was changing from reptile to birds, and it would become easy fodder for prey if it can't fly, and it doesn't have scales. If it's somewhere in between, it would become easy fodder for that. So survival of the fittest, right? It wouldn't survive. But even more importantly, those inward working parts are also irreducibly complex, so they would not be able to survive at all, as those parts are saying. So it means that macroevolution can't proceed. Irreducible complexity is any interconnected system that cannot function if any one component is taken away. Cells are irreducibly complex systems. If you mess with the cells of a living thing, it's not going to survive. Each cell in our bodies is irreducibly complex. And so if we change into something else, those cells will be affected. Those cells will change. They will no longer work. And so any intermediate between reptile and bird would be non-functional. It couldn't happen. So how is non-viability, I already mentioned this, how is non-viability of transitional forms proof against natural selection? In order for Darwinism to be true, living things must be viable while transitioning from one thing to another, from one species to another. And such an animal would be unlikely to survive even if it could function, because it would be easy prey for other animals. And so then the last one is molecular isolation. What is molecular isolation? Let's please do. Darwinists often say that evidence.
Was that you?
We're on page 148. At the bottom. Darwinists often say that evidence of common descent lies in the fact that all living things contain DNA. For example, Richard Dawkins states the reason we know for certain we are all related, including bacteria, is the universality of the genetic code and other biochemical fundamentals. Darwinists think that DNA similarity. Darwinists think that DNA similarity between apes and humans, for example, which some say is 85 to over 95%, strongly implies an ancestral relationship. But is this evidence of a common ancestry, or for a common creator? It could be interpreted either way. Perhaps the Darwinists are right. It is possible that we have a common genetic code because we've all descended from a common ancestor. But they could just as easily be wrong. Perhaps we have a common genetic code because a common creator has designed us to live in the same biosphere. After all, if every living creature were distinct biochemically, the food chain probably could not exist. Perhaps life with a different biochemical makeup is not possible. And even if it is, perhaps it couldn't survive in this biosphere. And then it goes through that series of things that are used for similar purposes. And so it's not that one evolved into the other, but that they are they're similar because of their similar tasks. As we said before, the capacity of the DNA genetic alphabet, I'm at the bottom of the page now, to contain a message is equivalent to the capacity of the English alphabet to contain a message. The only difference is that the DNA alphabet has only 4 letters versus 26 in the English alphabet. Since all living things have DNA, with its 4 nitrogen-containing bases, represented by the letters A, T, C, and G, we would expect a high degree of similarity in the information among creatures, whether or not they're ancestrally related. I don't want to go on reading this. So wait, I'm up here. So molecular isolation is about having the same DNA genetic code. And that could be evidence for evolution, but it could just as easily be evidence for a common creator and a common biosphere that needs that genetic code in order to exist. That's molecular isolation. Now, with the rest of the time that you have today, I'm going to have you read, and whatever you don't finish will be homework. I'm going to have you read pages 151 to 155. So you'll start with what about the fossil record, and you'll end with where it says, is intelligent design an intelligent alternative? And then you're going to answer equip 9. So pages 151 to 155, answer equip 9. And then that's it for today. If you have extra time, if you get done before class, then you can work on your study guide.
What is this?
Did you